It's the 23rd of May, 1982. The Principality of Monaco is playing host to the Formula 1 Grand Prix. It was as glamorous back then as it is nowadays. However, like nowadays, it was viewed as a track that was way too friggin' narrow, where overtaking was an impossibility. Not to mention the fact that this was the year where turbos were becoming a thing in Formula 1. But not all teams had them. Basically, it was the Ferraris and the Renaults who were powered by a turbo. I mean, yeah, the Brabhams and the Tollmans were turbocharged too, but the Brabhams kept on blowing up and the Tollmans were so slow at that stage that I can't even be asked to make a joke about them. Because they were the joke. The rest of the field were powered by prayer and leftover garments of Emerson Fittipaldi's orange juice. So basically, performance was pretty damn lopsided, save for the few moments where the turbos, for some reason, were slower than the cars that were meant to be slower than them. In the main though that year, the Renaults were way too fast. Almost certainly the fastest of the field, with two of the fastest drivers on the grid. But they did have a nasty habit of blowing their turbos before reaching the halfway stage of the race. Never mind the end of it, smoking French cars of course being a tradition that carries on to this day. But given they wouldn't be going fast enough in this race to cause any amount of stress to the power goodies, they were probably in with a chance here. And their driver, René Arnoux, took pole position by half a second over Riccardo Patrese, who was driving a decently fast Brabham with a standard V8 engine held together with Italian ham sponsor decals. Arnoux' teammate, Alain Prost, was also in with a good shout at victory, having proved to be a world-class driver in race trim. But they would have to deal with the noisily fast Ferrari of Didier Pironi. Leading into this race, the paddock were in mourning after the tragic death of Ferrari driver Gilles Villeneuve. Ferrari did withdraw from the previous race as a mark of respect and had arrived in Monaco with only one car for Didier Pironi. For Pironi, the best medicine to cope with the loss of a fellow driver was to get back into the driver's seat. That do be how it works. Other noticeable dudes in the field included Keke Rosberg and Derek Daly in the Williams, John Watson and Niki Lauda in the McLarens, and Bruno Giacomelli in the Alfa Romeo. His teammate, Andrea de Cesaris, was also interesting, mainly because he was a driver known to be able to crash while still in park. The race got underway and it was f***ing miserable. And I don't just mean weather-wise. From the start, the Renaults were just dominant. And despite Arnoux spinning out on lap 15 and being taken away by Crane, yes, that picture was legit, his teammate Prost just romped away and was cruising home to victory. Thus far, the race was in no way interesting.
Let's watch up, mouse.
It was your typical bore fest of a Monaco Grand Prix. Evidently, God was bored too, so he summoned some French rain upon the circuit, which should have enticed the drivers to slow down, but they're racing drivers. They don't know how to slow down. Somewhere where cameras were not about, Keke Rosberg slammed into the wall with 11 laps to go, and so did Derek Daly and the other Williams. But at least Daly kept on going, despite the notable handicap of his car coming off. He was also leaking oil onto the track, turning the surface from wet to now straight up undrivable. The sensible thing for Prost to do at that moment would be to slow down and cruise home to victory. But he didn't. He made it all the way to lap 73, which was a good percentage of the 76 laps required to finish the race, but it obviously wasn't quite 100%. This was a bottle job of catastrophic proportions, but for Riccardo Patrese, it was an open door. After Nelson Piquet had been disqualified in Brazil, Brabham were about to get their first Grand Prix win of the season. The team owner, Mr. Bernie Ecclestone, was very pleased at this notion. But then, on the penultimate lap, Patrese spun into station hairpin and stalled his car. Mr. Bernie Ecclestone was not pleased at this notion. With him out of commission, Pironi in the Ferrari went on through to take the lead. He'd lost his nose cone earlier in the race trying to pass Elio De Angelis, but who cares? Dude can literally crawl home from here. Huh? Perhaps try not to take that too literally, mate. Although this wasn't deliberate. Ferrari, being Ferrari, neglected to charge his battery correctly before the race start. And so with a few laps to go, it was beginning to misfire, which is not something you need when you're leading a race. But that wasn't to be the worst of his problems. On the final lap of the race, Pironi went through Portier and into the tunnel. But he wouldn't get out of it, the Ferrari grinding to a halt, being hit with the phenomenon the Italians call niente carburante, or as is known in English, no fuel. This would give the lead to the young eccentric Italian known as Andrea de Cesaris, provided of course he didn't have another crash. Thankfully, he did not have another crash, although that was mainly because his car ran out of fuel before he was given a chance to crash. 1, 2, 3, 4 cars out of contention to win the race. This meant that Derek Daly could win the race in whatever was left of his Formula 1 car. But then he went out of the race after he ran out of oil to dump on the track and his gearbox went on strike.
Well, we've got this ridiculous situation. We're all sitting by the start-finish line waiting for a winner to come past and we don't seem to be getting one.
This was a race that no one wanted to win. The next one down the road was, theoretically, Nigel Mansell, who would achieve his first Grand Prix win, that is, if he was still running. Well, he was still running. However, it wasn't him who took the lead. Instead, Riccardo Patrese, the guy who spun and stalled at the hairpin, had completely frauded his way back into the race. After the marshals had pushed his car conveniently into position, he bump-started his car going back down the hill, pled ignorance, hauled his Brabham around the final turn, took the checkered flag, and his maiden Grand Prix win. Why did I mention plead ignorance? Well, if your car is being pushed by outside assistance, and you start your car thanks to them, by letter of law, you are meant to be disqualified from the race. But Patrese was not disqualified here. Lucky bastard. And to cap off this orgy of strangeness, the podium was completed by Pironi and De Cesaris, and yet neither of them finished the race. In fact, by the end of the race, only 5 cars were running, and Patrese was the only one on the lead lap. It was crazy for everyone involved, although each played a part in what was the weirdest freaking Formula 1 finish of all time. For now.